Elaine wasn't supposed to get the invitation, not really. Not from someone like Vanessa. Not to an event like that. She found it tucked under a folder at the front desk, right next to the spray bottle she always used on the lobby windows. At first, she thought it was a mistake. Maybe someone had dropped it. Maybe it was for one of the office managers. But her name was printed on it, full name, spelled correctly, in thick cursive letters. That was the first sign something wasn't right. The envelope was heavy, cream-coloured, sealed with gold foil. You could tell it wasn't the kind of thing you handed out casually. It looked expensive, personal. And inside was an invitation to the wedding of Vanessa Langford and Tyler Reed. A ceremony hosted at the Rose Hill Gardens, a place Elaine had only seen from a distance when the bus she took passed by the wrought iron gates. She stood there for a moment, cleaning gloves still on, staring at it like it had teeth. Vanessa had always made a point of ignoring her, except when she didn't. And when she didn't, it was never out of kindness. There was always something behind her smile, too wide, too polished. Like she was constantly on the verge of saying something that might cut if you weren't careful. Vanessa was the kind of woman who spoke loudly enough that people had to stop and listen even when she wasn't saying anything important. She walked through the office building like it belonged to her. Maybe it did. Her fiancé was the company's golden boy, and her father sat on the board. Elaine didn't belong in that world. She wasn't even pretending to. Her sneakers squeaked on the marble floor as she stepped away from the desk, invitation in hand, heart starting to thump. It was a strange feeling, being seen by someone like Vanessa even for a second. But she knew better. This wasn't about generosity, it was something else. Later that evening, when she got home to her small one-bedroom apartment just outside the city, she laid the invitation down on the kitchen table and sat in silence. The room smelled like old lavender and dish soap. She hadn't turned the lights on yet. The sunset came through the blinds in soft golden lines across the floor, and she stared at that envelope like it might explode. Elaine Monroe was 52 years old. Her hands were tired but steady. She didn't scare easily. Not anymore. She'd worked jobs where people didn't look her in the eye. She'd walked past rooms where laughter stopped the second she entered. And she had learned to live without needing anyone's approval. But this felt different. She picked up the envelope again and read it slowly, her eyes catching on each word like they were pieces of a puzzle. You are warmly invited to celebrate the union of Vanessa Langford and Tyler Reed. Saturday evening at Rose Hill Gardens, black tie required. Black tie. Elaine scoffed under her breath. She owned 2 pairs of work pants and 1 black cardigan. Her last real dress had been donated to Goodwill years ago. The idea of walking into a wedding filled with money, with people who ordered champagne like it was water, made her stomach turn. And yet, something about it kept pulling her back. The thing was, Elaine hadn't always been a janitor. That's what most people saw now, just the woman with gloves and a mop. But there was a version of her that once stood at a podium and gave a scholarship check to a young girl who cried in her arms. A version of her that used to speak to classrooms full of kids who didn't think they'd ever get out of their zip code. That version had been buried under years of loss. After her mother passed, after her brother got sick, after everything she'd built slowly slipped through her fingers, Elaine stopped showing up to the world the same way. She let herself shrink to survive, let herself be unseen, but now someone had handed her a spotlight, and whether they meant it or not, it was hers to walk into. She looked down at her hands, still strong, still steady, and whispered to herself, what if I did show up? Elaine didn't sleep that night. She tried. God knows she tried. She changed into her worn pyjamas, made a cup of chamomile tea, even lit one of those lavender candles her niece gave her last Christmas. But nothing worked. Every time she closed her eyes, the same image came back, walking through the gates of Rose Hill Gardens, alone, with all those eyes turning toward her, judging, smirking. She sat on the edge of her bed, holding the invitation in her lap like it might whisper answers if she stayed quiet long enough. Was it really a joke, a setup? Or worse, was it a test? The kind where they dared you to show up, just so they could laugh louder. Elaine had been through enough to recognise when people thought they were better than her. She'd cleaned up after parties she wasn't invited to, heard the comments when they didn't think she was listening. She knew how people like Vanessa moved, graceful on the outside, sharp as glass underneath. Still, the question stayed with her. What if this wasn't about them? What if it was about her? The next morning, she stood in front of her hallway mirror, still in her robe, eyes searching her own reflection. She hadn't really looked at herself in a while, not like this. There were more lines around her mouth now. Her curls had more grey than black. But there was something else too. Something in her posture, in the way she held her chin a little higher than usual. Maybe it was time. She opened the top drawer of the nightstand, reached to the back, and pulled out an old leather-bound planner. The cover was scratched, the corners worn down, but inside were phone numbers written in blue ink. People from another life. One name stood out: Melanie Carter. Elaine hadn't spoken to Melanie in almost 4 years. The last time they talked, Melanie had been moving to Savannah to open a small boutique. Back then, she was just getting started, designing dresses for local pageants and Sunday church services. Elaine stared at the name a long time before she picked up the phone. The line rang once, twice, then a voice came through, warm, familiar, a little breathless. "Elaine?" There was silence. Elaine almost forgot how to speak. Her throat caught, then finally, "Hey, it's me. I know it's been a while." "Girl, you could have been gone 10 years and I'd still pick up on the first ring. What's going on?" Elaine took a breath. "I got invited to a wedding." Melanie paused, playful. "Okay, and this is news because it's not just any wedding, it's Vanessa Langford's." Melanie let out a short breath. "Wait, the one who always acted like she was allergic to decency?" "That's the one. Why in the world would she invite you?" Elaine sat down slowly, pressing the phone closer to her ear. "I think it's a joke. I think she wants me to show up so she can laugh, so they can all laugh." Melanie didn't respond right away. Then came her voice, softer this time. "Well, that's one possibility, but here's another. Maybe it's not about what they think. Maybe it's about what you remember." Elaine swallowed. "I don't have a dress, Mel. I don't have the shoes or the hair or the makeup. I haven't been that woman in years." Melanie's voice steadied. "But she's still in there, and if you let me help, I can bring her back." There was a long pause between them. The kind of silence that only exists between two people who once believed in each other without question. "You serious?" Elaine asked, almost a whisper. "I already cleared my weekend," Melanie said. "And if this wedding's going to be a show, then baby, let's make sure you're the headliner." Elaine didn't say anything for a moment. Her heart was thudding in her chest. Not out of fear, but something else. Something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. She leaned back against the cushion of the old couch, let out a quiet laugh, and whispered into the phone, "Okay, let's do it." Melanie smiled on the other end. "Now you're talking." By Friday afternoon, the front steps of Elaine's building hadn't changed, still cracked at the edges with a little grass pushing through the concrete. But everything else felt different. A white sedan pulled up slowly and stopped at the curb. It wasn't flashy, just clean, polished and quiet. The back door opened and there she was. Melanie stepped out wearing oversized sunglasses, a ponytail tucked into a patterned scarf, and a denim jacket over a simple black dress. She looked like someone who had come home, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. Elaine opened the front door and stood at the top of the steps, arms crossed, a smile already tugging at the corner of her mouth. Melanie looked up at her and grinned. Well, you look exactly the same, just a little taller now standing up straight like that." Elaine laughed, stepping down to meet her. "You're late." "You're lucky I came at all," Melanie teased, pulling her into a hug. "Besides, real queens don't rush." They held each other for a long second, long enough for the world to pause. Inside Elaine's apartment, the kitchen table had been cleared for the first time in weeks. Melanie dropped her bag and started unpacking small garment bags, fabric swatches, boxes of accessories, and something wrapped in tissue paper that made a soft clinking sound when she moved it. Elaine watched from the doorway, arms still crossed, part skeptical, part amazed. "You didn't have to bring all this." Melanie turned around, one eyebrow raised. "Excuse me, I told you if we're doing this, we're doing it right." She walked over and unzipped the first garment bag. A sleek, floor-length dress in navy blue shimmered slightly in the light. It wasn't flashy. It didn't need to be. The lines were clean, the fabric soft but structured. It looked like something that belonged in a room full of people who wore confidence like cologne. Elaine stepped closer, her hand brushed the fabric. "It's beautiful," she said softly. Melanie's voice dropped into something warmer. So are you. You just forgot for a while. Elaine turned away quickly, pretending to check something on the stove, blinking a little harder than usual. They spent the next few hours going through accessories, shoes, earrings, and even a small clutch that Melanie said used to belong to her mother. "Don't tell anyone," she whispered, "but it's got good luck in it." Later that evening, Melanie pulled out a compact mirror and gently touched Elaine's cheek. "Your skin's still got that glow, you just needed a little reminder." Elaine scoffed. "All I see are lines." "That's called life," Melanie said. "You've lived it. That's not something to cover up. That's something to walk in with your head held high." For the first time in a long time, Elaine let someone else take care of her. Not out of pity, not out of charity, but out of love. They ordered takeout, Chinese, like old times. Ate on the couch, talked about nothing and everything, about how tired they were of being strong all the time, about the people who forgot they existed once they stopped being useful, about the dreams they still had but didn't always say out loud. At one point, Melanie pulled out an old photograph. The two of them standing in front of a community centre, arms around each other, wearing matching event t-shirts and big goofy smiles. Elaine stared at it for a long time. "I miss her," she said quietly. "The woman in that photo." Melanie looked at her. "She never left, she just got quiet." Elaine nodded slowly. Outside, the city buzzed with weekend traffic. Somewhere, people were getting ready for weddings, for parties, for things that didn't include women like her. But tomorrow she would walk into one of those places, not to prove anything to anyone else, just to remember who she'd always been. The morning of the wedding came in quietly. No big moment, no dramatic sunrise, just a soft breeze coming through the cracked window and the hum of traffic somewhere far below. Elaine sat at the kitchen table, a cup of coffee in both hands, staring out at the grey sky. She had woken up before the alarm, like she always did. Years of early shifts had trained her body to rise without asking. But today felt different, not because she was nervous. That feeling had passed sometime during the night, somewhere between the fourth egg roll and Melanie's story about tripping over a toddler during a church fashion show. No, what she felt now was something steadier. Not excitement, not dread, just readiness. Melanie came out of the bedroom, still in her slippers, rubbing her eyes. "You slept?" Elaine nodded. "Better than I thought I would." They didn't say much during breakfast, the kind of quiet that didn't need filling. Just the clink of spoons against ceramic and the low hum of the city outside. After dishes were done and hair was washed, they started. Melanie worked like she was painting something sacred, each brush stroke deliberate, each decision made with care. She didn't go over the top, she didn't try to make Elaine look like someone else. She brought Elaine forward, that was the difference. The dress fit like it had been waiting for her. Not a costume, not a disguise, just the right reflection of the woman who had lived 1,000 quiet lives and still chose to walk into one more room full of strangers. Elaine stood in front of the mirror and looked at herself fully. Not with critique, not searching for what was missing, just seeing. Her hair was pulled back into a soft updo, a few silver strands left untouched on purpose. The earrings were small, gold, and old, passed down from her mother. Her nails were short and clean. Her shoes weren't designer, but they were steady, and so was she. "You look like the woman I remember," Melanie said, her voice low. Elaine smiled, and this time it reached her eyes. "I feel like her again." They left the apartment just after 3. The car ride was quiet at first. Elaine stared out the window, watching neighbourhoods blur past. The corner store where she used to buy milk, the park where she once gave a speech on community funding, the old library that still had a faded photo of her taped to the bulletin board. It was strange how life moved on without asking. How easily you could go from someone people looked up to someone people looked past. But not today. As they turned onto the long, private road that led to Rose Hill Gardens, Elaine felt it. That tightening in the chest, that familiar sting behind the eyes. She hadn't expected it, but there it was. Grief and pride, and something that felt like coming home, all tangled together. Melanie reached over and placed a hand on hers. "You don't owe them anything," she said gently. "This moment is yours, don't let them take it." Elaine nodded slowly. She didn't say anything, she didn't have to. The gates came into view, tall black iron wrapped in ivy, opening slowly as their car approached. Just beyond them, A courtyard buzzed with soft music, laughter, and the kind of beauty that money made effortless. Elaine took a deep breath. She wasn't here to impress anyone. She wasn't here to make a statement. She wasn't even here to reclaim something. She was just here. And somehow that was enough. The car came to a stop. Melanie stepped out first and came around to open Elaine's door. "You ready?" she asked. Elaine looked out at the world waiting on the other side of the tinted glass. "I don't know," she said honestly, "but I'm going anyway." And with that, she took the first step. The courtyard was already filling up when Elaine stepped through the gates. Soft jazz floated through the air. Waiters in black vests moved gracefully between tables, carrying silver trays topped with glasses that sparkled in the late afternoon sun. Guests stood in little clusters, laughing, posing, fixing each other's sleeves. It all looked effortless, expensive, rehearsed. No one noticed her at first. Elaine took one small step onto the stone path, her heels clicking gently beneath her. She walked slowly, shoulders relaxed, hands folded around a small navy clutch Melanie had insisted she carry. The dress moved with her, smooth, quiet, elegant, as if it already belonged in the space before she ever arrived. Still, her heart beat hard. She kept her eyes forward, not because she was scared, but because she knew the moment would come, when someone would stop mid-sentence and the room would shift. And just like that it did. A woman near the floral arch glanced over her shoulder and paused. Her glass tilted slightly. Her mouth opened, just a little. Then another guest looked up, then another. The laughter didn't stop, not all at once, but it stumbled. A few conversations trailed off. Somewhere, a fork clinked against a plate. Elaine kept walking. She wasn't trying to stand out. She wasn't trying to make a scene. She just moved the way someone does when they've spent years trying to disappear and finally decided not to. A man in a grey suit leaned toward his friend. "Who is that?" His friend squinted. I don't know, maybe a donor?" Elaine didn't look at either of them. She kept her focus on the far end of the courtyard, where the reception space opened under a canopy of white lights and hanging greenery. That's where Vanessa stood, near the front, framed in a designer gown and a spray of photographers. Her smile was bright, her posture perfect, until she turned. At first, Vanessa didn't react. She saw a woman in navy walking across the stone path, someone graceful, someone unfamiliar. Then her brow tightened, her eyes narrowed. And then it hit. Vanessa's posture shifted, just a little. Her fingers curled tighter around her bouquet. The smile on her face stopped being automatic. You could see it in her eyes, recognition. Elaine kept walking. Vanessa leaned toward one of her bridesmaids, whispering sharply, "Why is she here? I thought you said she wouldn't come." "I didn't think she would," Vanessa hissed. Elaine didn't stop. She didn't rush either. She just moved like she belonged, because today she did. Her presence wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It was the kind that rearranged the room without ever raising its voice. Melanie followed a few steps behind, holding her camera bag and a look that said, "Try me." No one dared. A server approached with a tray, clearly unsure, offering a glass of champagne with a nervous smile. Elaine accepted it gently, nodded in thanks, and turned toward the nearest table. People were watching now, some curious, some uncomfortable, some unsure if they should say hello. That was fine. She wasn't here for them. From across the space, someone else recognized her, not a bridesmaid, not a guest. A man in his 60s, salt and pepper hair, tailored suit, standing by the garden fountain. He froze when he saw her. Took a step forward, eyes wide. "Eyes. Elaine Monroe," he said almost under his breath. Elaine looked up, their eyes met. He stepped closer. "You probably don't remember me, but I was at your financial literacy workshops years ago. I was just starting out. You helped me get my first small business loan. You were incredible." Elaine blinked, surprised, caught off guard in the best way. Thank you," she said softly. The man turned to the person beside him. "That woman changed my life," he said. The person nodded, watching Elaine with new eyes. Vanessa saw it all, and her face, that carefully sculpted face, faltered. Just a little. Vanessa's smile was starting to crack. It was subtle. Most people wouldn't have noticed. But Elaine did. She saw it from across the courtyard. The way Vanessa's lips tightened, the way her hand clutched the bouquet just a little too hard, like she was trying to hold something in place that had already started to shift. Elaine didn't gloat. She didn't smirk. She just stood still, tall and composed, with her glass of champagne resting gently between her fingers. The sun was low now, casting soft gold across the garden, lighting her up in a way that felt almost intentional, like the light knew who deserved it most. More guests had turned to look, not all at once, not in a dramatic, movie-style gasp, but gradually, one pair of eyes at a time. Some leaned in, whispering, others just stared, trying to place the woman in navy with the calm, unwavering expression. Then another voice spoke, this time from somewhere near the back of the garden. "Oh my God, is that Elaine Monroe?" A woman, maybe in her 30s, stepped forward slightly. She was dressed in a sleek, pale green gown, hair pinned up, makeup flawless. But the way she looked at Elaine wasn't polished or performative. It was real, emotional. Elaine turned, surprised. The woman smiled softly. "You probably don't remember me. You used to volunteer at West Haven Middle School. You helped me apply for a scholarship. You told me I had a future when no one else did." Her voice cracked a little. "I never got to thank you." Elaine blinked, her throat tightening. "You didn't have to," she said. But the woman shook her head. "No, I did." The conversation had stopped now. Fully. Guests who had been mid-sip or mid-sentence were frozen, watching something they hadn't expected to see. Not tonight, not at this kind of wedding. It was a shift, not the kind that makes noise. The kind that makes people feel. Vanessa was no longer the centre of attention, and she knew it. She walked over, her heels clicking a little too fast on the stone, bouquet still in hand. Her smile had returned, but it didn't look the same. It was thinner now, almost stiff. "Well," she said brightly, too brightly, "look who decided to join us." Elaine didn't move. She didn't raise her voice. She just met Vanessa's eyes, calm, level. "I was invited," she said. Vanessa gave a short, tight laugh. Of course you were. Just surprised, that's all. Didn't think you'd actually show." Elaine tilted her head slightly. "You didn't want me to." Vanessa's smile held for a beat too long. "That's not fair." "It's honest," Elaine replied. Melanie stepped closer just in case, but Elaine didn't need her. Vanessa let out a sigh, trying to shake off the tension. "Well, you're here now, so enjoy the evening." She turned, but before she could walk away, a man stepped forward. The same older gentleman who had spoken earlier. His voice was firmer now. "Vanessa, do you even realise who this woman is?" Vanessa turned, startled. "Excuse me." The man looked around the courtyard. Elaine Monroe built programs in this city long before most of us had our first job. She helped young people get into college, helped single parents get loans. She showed up for this community again and again when no one else did. Whispers rippled. Vanessa's jaw tightened. "That was a long time ago." "And?" the man asked, raising his eyebrows. "Since when does time erase impact?" Elaine felt something move deep in her chest. Not pride exactly, more like return. The feeling of being seen not just for what she looked like, but for the weight of the life she had lived. She stepped forward gently. Her voice was quiet, but clear enough to carry. "I didn't come here to steal a spotlight. I didn't come to stir anything up. I came because I was invited, even if it wasn't for the right reasons." She glanced toward Vanessa for just a second, then looked back to the crowd. "I came because it's easy to forget people who live quiet lives, people who work behind the scenes, people you pass in hallways without ever learning their names. But just because someone's invisible doesn't mean they're nothing." She paused, let that settle. "And sometimes," she added, "it's worth remembering, the quietest ones in the room often carry the loudest stories." No one clapped, not yet. No one moved. The air felt still, thick with something unspoken. Elaine turned away, heading toward one of the garden benches. Behind her, Vanessa stood frozen. And the truth was, she wasn't the star of her own wedding anymore. Elaine sat on the edge of a garden bench, legs crossed, hands resting in her lap. The music had picked up again, gentle now, like the kind you hear in movies when everything quiets down, but something important is still happening. She let out a slow breath. Across the courtyard, people had returned to mingling, but the air hadn't quite settled. There was a tension there, invisible but felt, like something had cracked open and no one knew how to put it back. She didn't mind. She hadn't come for applause. She came because she needed to know that if someone tried to write her off, she could still hold the pen. Elaine looked down at the soft folds of her dress. The navy fabric still held its shape perfectly, even as the light changed around it. A breeze picked up, gentle, brushing against her skin. And for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel small in her own body. She heard footsteps. Not rushed, not hesitant, measured. When she looked up, a man was approaching, suit slightly wrinkled, tie a little loose, drink in hand. It was Tyler, the groom. He didn't say anything at first, just nodded politely, then sat down beside her, leaving a respectful space between them. For a moment, they both just watched the water ripple in the small garden fountain nearby. "I had no idea," he finally said. Elaine glanced at him. "About what?" He rubbed the back of his neck. "About who you are, about what you've done. I just thought you worked in the building." "I did," she said simply. "Still do, on weekdays." Tyler exhaled. "Look, I know Vanessa can be a lot." Elaine gave him a look, not judgmental, just knowing. "You don't have to explain her to me," she said. He nodded slowly. "Fair." A silence fell between them again, but it wasn't uncomfortable. After a few beats, Tyler leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "When I first started at the firm," he said quietly, "I used to stay late. I was trying to prove something, I guess. Most nights everyone else was gone, except one person, you." Elaine blinked, surprised. "I'd hear the wheels of your cart coming down the hallway," he continued. "Sometimes I'd be stuck on something, numbers that didn't add up, or a pitch I couldn't get right. And you'd walk by, say something simple like, 'Don't overthink it, kid,' and I'd laugh. But the funny thing is, you were usually right." Elaine chuckled softly. "That does sound like me." He smiled, then grew serious again. "I never said thank you, for those nights, for being kind, even when you didn't have to be." She looked at him for a long moment. "You were just a kid trying to find your footing. We've all been there." Tyler nodded. "Still am most days." Elaine tilted her head slightly. "Then maybe today's a good time to ask yourself what kind of man you want to be." He looked at her, the question landing heavier than expected. "I'm serious," she said, her voice gentle. "You can let moments like this pass and pretend they don't mean anything. Or you can let them wake you up a little." Tyler didn't respond right away, just stared at the ground, deep in thought. Finally he stood up. "Would you stay? For the reception, I mean." Elaine raised an eyebrow. "After all that?" He scratched the back of his head. "Maybe especially after all that." She smiled, not big, not dramatic, just soft and real. "I'll think about it." He nodded. "I hope you do." Then he walked off, shoulders a little straighter, pace a little slower. Elaine sat alone again, but the bench didn't feel cold this time. Something was shifting, not just around her, inside her too. Elaine didn't end up staying for the full reception. She stayed long enough to see the sun dip below the garden walls, long enough to watch the fairy lights flicker to life overhead, and long enough to hear the sound of a violin drift into something slow and nostalgic. But once the dancing started, the part where the real smiles came out and the drinks flowed freely, she knew it was time. Melanie met her near the valet, holding her phone in one hand, looking proud and a little teary-eyed. "You good?" she asked. Elaine nodded. "Yeah, I'm ready to go." They didn't say much on the ride home. The silence wasn't heavy, just full. The kind of silence that holds everything that just happened, all the words spoken and unspoken, like a sealed envelope. Back at Elaine's apartment, she changed out of the dress carefully, almost reverently, like it had carried something sacred. Melanie hung it back in the garment bag without a word. They sat on the couch afterwards, shoeless, tired but not drained, more like full in the soul. "Thank you," Elaine said finally. Melanie nudged her gently with an elbow. "You did that. I just brought earrings and eyeliner." Elaine smiled. "No, you brought me back to myself." Melanie looked at her for a long moment. "So what now?" Elaine didn't answer right away. She stared out the window, same view as always, same rooftops, same power lines, but something inside her had changed. The next morning she was up early. Not because she had to be anywhere, but because her mind wouldn't rest. She pulled out the old binder from the hallway closet, the one with the cracked spine and fading sticker that read Community Programs, Monroe File. Inside were outlines, grant proposals, handwritten notes from parents and students, budget breakdowns scribbled in the margins. She hadn't touched it in years. She ran her fingers over one of the pages. A letter from a young girl named Tasha. "Because of your help," it read, "I feel like I matter." Elaine closed the binder gently and sat with it in her lap. That afternoon her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She hesitated before answering. "Hello? Is this Elaine Monroe?" a woman asked. Her voice was calm, professional but kind. "Speaking. My name is Rachel Liu. I was at the wedding last night. I work with a local non-profit that supports women returning to the workforce. We're expanding into mentorship and education. Someone mentioned your name and, well, I did some digging." Elaine blinked, surprised. "Digging?" "Nothing scary," Rachel chuckled. "Just enough to realise you've built things that matter. And I was wondering if you'd ever be open to, I don't know, speaking with our team, maybe even consulting." Elaine sat in stunned silence. "I know it's a big ask out of nowhere," Rachel continued, "but something about the way you carried yourself last night, it stayed with people, with me." Elaine swallowed the lump rising in her throat. "Can I think about it?" "Of course," Rachel said. "Take your time, I'll text you my info, and if you ever want to talk, we'd be lucky to have you." When the call ended, Elaine just sat there for a while. She wasn't used to being asked, not anymore, and she definitely wasn't used to being seen without having to prove herself first. Later that evening, Melanie returned from grabbing groceries and found Elaine sitting at the kitchen table, surrounded by open folders, a pen in one hand, a quiet fire behind her eyes. Melanie leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "You're really thinking about it, aren't you?" Elaine nodded. "I think I'm more than thinking." "Good," Melanie said. "About time." Elaine looked up at her, her voice soft but sure. "I'm tired of hiding." The next few days moved slowly. Not in a bad way, more like the air had shifted, just enough to make room for something new. Elaine went back to work on Monday. Same building, same uniform, same cart with the wobbly wheel. But when she walked through the lobby, something was different. A few people nodded, a few more looked up, not with pity, not with awkwardness, but with recognition. Like they'd just realised they'd been passing someone important every day without ever stopping to ask her name. She didn't need applause, but that quiet respect, it settled into her bones like warmth after a long winter. By Tuesday, she'd replied to Rachel's message. Nothing big, just a thank you and a simple, "would love to talk more." They scheduled a meeting for Friday. Virtual. Low pressure. Elaine spent hours the night before reading through her old notes, brushing off parts of her brain she hadn't used in a long time. She didn't want to pretend she hadn't changed, but she also didn't want to walk in acting like she'd forgotten everything she used to carry with pride. Melanie sat on the couch while Elaine practiced. "You don't need to sound polished," she said, flipping through a magazine. "You just need to sound like you." Elaine glanced up. "What if I freeze?" Melanie shrugged. "Then you freeze, and then you breathe, and then you start again." Friday came. The meeting started at 3. Rachel appeared on screen with a smile that felt genuine from the first second. She introduced a few team members, all women, all different ages and backgrounds, all clearly excited to meet her. They didn't come at her with rehearsed questions or buzzwords. They asked real things. Where had she worked? What programs had she built? What did she love most about the work? And then came a pause. One of them leaned in closer to her camera. "Can I ask something kind of personal?" Elaine nodded. "Sure." "What made you walk away from all of it?" Elaine sat with the question for a second longer than usual. "Life," she said softly. "Loss, fatigue. People who made me feel like none of it mattered anymore." She looked up at the screen. "But that wasn't true. I just started believing it was." The woman nodded. No judgment, just listening. Rachel leaned forward. "You haven't lost your voice, Elaine. You just buried it, and I think it's time to dig it back up." That line stayed with her long after the meeting ended. That night, Elaine made tea and sat at the same kitchen table where she used to clip coupons and sort bills. But now the table was covered in folders, sticky notes, a few brochures Melanie brought home from the community centre, and in the middle of it all, a notepad filled with scribbles, ideas, things she might call a workshop if she let herself believe she could run one again. She didn't feel rushed. This wasn't about being someone all over again. It was about returning to the part of herself that had never really left. The part that wanted to build again. Not big, not loud, just true. And that night, as she turned off the lights and stood at the bedroom door, she whispered something to the quiet room. "I'm not done yet." It was a small room. Not fancy, no stage, no lights, just a row of folding chairs, a whiteboard, and a circle of women sitting with coffee cups and notebooks in their laps. The kind of place where people came not to impress anyone, but to figure things out. Elaine stood at the front, hands lightly resting on the back of a chair. Her notes sat on the small table beside her, though she hadn't looked at them in 15 minutes. She didn't need them. This wasn't a speech. It was a conversation. They'd invited her to speak as part of a local series on rebuilding, focused on women who were trying to start over. Some had just come out of long relationships. Some had been laid off. Some were mums who'd put their dreams on hold for years. All of them had shown up because something inside them refused to quit. And Elaine, she knew that feeling better than most. I don't have a secret formula, she was saying. I don't have 10 steps to confidence or a plan that works for everyone. What I have is a story, and maybe that's enough. She paused, scanning the faces in the room. I spent years believing that if I wasn't being seen, I didn't matter. That if no one clapped when I walked into a room, then I'd done something wrong. She let out a soft laugh. Turns out you don't need applause. You need a mirror and a reminder. A woman near the back wiped her eyes. Another nodded slowly, like she was hearing her own thoughts said out loud. Elaine smiled. You don't need to be loud to be powerful. You don't need to prove yourself to people who never cared to understand you. You just need to remember who you are and protect that memory when the world tries to rewrite it. Afterward, people stayed behind. Not because they had to, but because they wanted to. A few asked questions, a few simply said thank you. One woman handed her a folded piece of paper and whispered, "This helped more than you know." Elaine didn't leave right away. She waited until the room had emptied, until the chairs were stacked, until the whiteboard had been wiped clean. Then she stepped outside into the early evening air. The sky was low and pink, and the breeze smelled faintly of jasmine from the community garden nearby. She closed her eyes for a moment, breathing it in. Then she heard a voice. "Elaine?" She turned. It was the young woman from the wedding, the one in the pale green dress, the one she hadn't expected to see again. "I didn't mean to surprise you," the woman said. "I saw the flyer last week. I wasn't sure if it was really you, but I had to come." Elaine's face softened. "You didn't have to." "I know," the woman said. "That's why I did." She reached into her bag and pulled out a small envelope. "It's nothing big, just something I thought you should have." Elaine opened it slowly. Inside was a photo, old, a little faded, of a group of middle schoolers at a science fair, all wearing matching t-shirts, standing beside poster boards. Elaine was there too, crouched beside one of them, laughing, holding a clipboard. "I was the girl in the third row," the woman said. "That day changed me. I just wanted you to know you didn't disappear." Elaine held the photo carefully, like it was made of something delicate. "Thank you," she whispered. The woman smiled, hugged her gently, and then walked away down the sidewalk, disappearing into the pink light. Elaine stood there for a moment longer. She wasn't famous, she wasn't rich, her name wasn't on any building, but tonight none of that mattered. She mattered, and for the first time in a long time that was enough. Elaine didn't show up to prove a point, she showed up to remember who she was. And maybe that's the lesson. You don't need a spotlight to matter. You don't need permission to take up space. Your worth doesn't disappear just because someone else forgets it. Sometimes the quietest return is the most powerful one. Thank you for staying with me until the very last moment of this story. I'm truly grateful for your time. If you felt something, even just a little, I'd love if you gave this video a like and subscribe to the channel. Wishing you peace, luck, and quiet strength wherever you are. See you again, right here on Rain Inside.